Hi, welcome back to my channel about the black man's burden. I'm Frederick Segerfeldt. Last week we talked about racism and the fact that the West is more racist than the West. Today I'm going to talk about the history of racism. Post colonialists and the leftist people in general they argue that racism was created by the West in order to legitimize imperialism, and hence they argue that racism was born in the 19th century. This idea has then spread to mainstream society. A couple of examples are the Swedish National Encyclopedia. It says the idea that some people are superior to others because of a certain racial property is essentially a Western creation. The Swedish political Left Party, in its program from 2012, says today's racism has an historical background in the time when colonialism's exploitation was to be justified. And Sven Lindqvist, a famous Swedish writer, he wrote a book called Exterminate All the Brutes, in Swedish, Utrota varenda jävel. He has a section in that book called The Birth of Racism, and something he argues took place in the 19th century. This just isn't true. Of course, colonialism was racist, especially in its latest phases. The entire Western world was very racist in the 19th century and also in the first half of the 20th century. Even Karl Marx was a racist. He was an anti-Semite. He's famous for that. He said that the Jews living in Prussia's Polish provinces, he called them the filthiest of all races. He also said that the common Negro type is only the degenerate form of a much higher one. But as Portuguese historian Francisco Betancourt argues in his book Racisms, the different colonial experiences confirmed rather than created the vision of black as an inferior human type. Colonialism reinforced something that was already present. In fact, most societies have been racist. Edward Said, one of the heroes of post colonialism, someone would say perhaps that he is the founder of post-colonialism. He wrote a famous book called Orientalism, and in that book he says, human societies, at least the more advanced cultures, have rarely offered the individual anything but imperialism, racism, and ethnocentrism for dealing with other cultures. Another example is Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari in the bestseller *Sapiens*. He says there, in a number of languages, the word for the own people is the same word as for human being, meaning that other humans are in fact not humans. So racism is historically a general thing that I've existed in many places and in many times. But scholars who write about the history of racism, they disagree about when it actually was born. Another Israeli historian, Benjamin Isaac, wrote a book called The Invention of Racism in Classical Antiquity, in which he argues that racism was actually born then in classical antiquity. And Francisco Betancourt, the Portuguese historian just mentioned, he points to the Crusades and La Reconquista, that is the reconquering of the Iberian Peninsula from the Moors, as the birth of racism. And American historian George Fredrickson talks about anti-Semitism in Europe during the late Middle Ages. I don't know exactly who of them is correct. The point is that none of them says that racism was born during colonialism or imperialism. And it is not primarily Western in history. The Indian caste system is 2,000 years old, and it's based on race. Racism in China is more than 1,000 years old. And also in the Arab Muslim world, racism has a long history. Muhammad, the Prophet, is reported to have said, "You should listen to and obey your ruler, even if he is an Ethiopian, that is, a black, slave whose head looks like a raisin." And Ibn Khaldun, a 14th century Arab philosopher and historian, said the Negro nations are, as a rule, submissive to slavery because Negroes have little that is essentially human and have attributes that are quite similar to those of dumb animals. Racism sucks, but the idea that it is something that was born in 19th century Europe is simply false. Thanks for watching. Next week we're going to talk about imperialism. Stay tuned and please subscribe. Bye bye.